Clara Bennett pressed her father's ledger against her chest and walked through the front door of Whitmore Estate, the same house where her father had died with a secret no one wanted to hear. Her hands were shaking. Her dress was plain. She had no family name worth speaking and no fortune worth counting. But she carried the truth. And the truth her father always said was the most dangerous thing a poor woman could bring into a rich man's house. She was about to find out how right he was. If this story moves something in you, hit subscribe, stay until the very end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The summer of 1815 sat over Virginia like a wet wool blanket, heavy, suffocating, and impossible to ignore. The roads leading to Whitmore Estate were packed dirt turned soft by the morning's brief rain, and by the time the carriages began arriving just after 9 o'clock, the wheels left deep grooves in the red earth. 30 women came that morning. 30 women in silk and lace and carefully arranged hair. 30 women who had been told through whispers passed at church socials and letters exchanged between drawing rooms that Nathaniel Whitmore was looking for a wife. Not asking, looking. There was a difference, and every woman who climbed those front steps understood it. Inside the estate, the main hall had been arranged to receive guests' chairs set in a careful arc, a table near the window bearing crystal pitchers of water and sweet tea that nobody touched. The women sat with their hands folded in their laps and their spines perfectly straight, and they watched the door at the far end of the hall, the way people watch a storm coming in off the mountains, knowing it's beautiful, and knowing it could kill them. Nathaniel Whitmore entered without ceremony. He was 38 years old, tall in the way that men are tall when they have spent their whole lives expecting rooms to accommodate them. His coat was well cut, but not showy. His face was the kind of face that had once been called handsome, and had since been carved into something harder by years and loss, and the particular weight of being responsible for 600 acres of land and the people who worked it. His hair was dark, touched with gray at the temples. His eyes were the color of river water in late October. Not cold exactly, but not warm either. He did not smile when he entered the room. He stood at the front of the arc of chairs and looked at the 30 women before him the way a man looks at a problem he is not sure he can solve. "Ladies," he said, "I appreciate you coming." His voice was quiet. Not soft. There was a difference, but controlled in the way of a man who had learned that people lean in when you speak low, and that gives you something authority alone cannot purchase. "I intend to ask each of you one question," he continued. "The same question. I will listen to your answer. That is all. There will be no second question, no further interview. I will make my decision based solely on what you say to me in the next few minutes." One of the women near the center of the room, Mrs. Harrington's eldest daughter, a composed young woman in pale yellow, shifted slightly in her chair. "What sort of question?" she asked. Nathaniel looked at her without expression. "The sort that tells me who you are." The room was quiet after that. He walked to the first woman on his left and stood before her. She was perhaps 25, the daughter of a tobacco merchant, with dark curls and a careful smile. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore," she replied. "A hungry man," he said, "living on the edge of my property. A tenant farmer, 3 children under 10, steals food from my kitchen storehouse. My estate manager tells me the man must be punished. He says if we let it pass, every tenant on the land will think they can take what they please. What would you do?" The woman's smile stayed in place, but something behind her eyes recalculated quickly. "I would trust your manager's judgment," she said. "He knows the estate. Discipline is important." Nathaniel nodded once, said, "Thank you," and moved to the next woman. The pattern repeated itself across the arc of chairs. Some women answered with careful deference to authority. Some cited scripture about the sanctity of property. One suggested the farmer could work off the debt. Another said the punishment should be public to set an example for the other tenants. 2 women, to their credit, hesitated visibly, but then gave some version of the same answer. Follow the law, protect the estate, uphold order. Nathaniel moved from chair to chair with the patience of a man who had already decided he was not going to find what he was looking for. His expression did not change. He thanked each woman the same way, one nod, 2 words, and moved on. By the time he reached the 30th woman, a light sweat had broken along the back of his collar from the summer heat, and the crystal pitchers of sweet tea on the table near the window had begun to sweat too. The 30th woman, a composed widow of 40, the most experienced in the room, and therefore the most strategic, answered with a kind of rehearsed compassion. "I would have food sent to the family," she said, "so that there would be no reason for him to steal again. But I would also make clear to him that the theft was noted, that there are proper channels, that charity exists for those who ask for it." Nathaniel thanked her and stood at the front of the room again. "Thank you all," he said. "I will be in contact." The women began to gather their things. It was at this point that Margaret, his housekeeper, who had been standing near the door to the servants' corridor for the past 40 minutes with the particular stillness of someone trying very hard not to have an opinion, stepped forward. "Mr. Whitmore," she said quietly, "there is one more." He turned to look at her. "One more," he said. "Yes, sir. She arrived late. She had some difficulty with the road, I believe. She is in the kitchen." Margaret paused. "She is not—" Another pause. "She is not like the others." Something passed across Nathaniel's face. Not warmth exactly. More like the slight adjustment of a man who has been waiting for something to be different and is not sure yet whether this qualifies. "Send her in," he said. Clara Bennett had been sitting in the kitchen of Whitmore Estate for 23 minutes, with her hands flat on her knees and her father's ledger in the canvas bag at her feet. And she had been deciding the entire time whether to leave. She could leave. The back door was unlocked. The cook, a broad-shouldered woman named Delia, who had brought Clara a glass of water without being asked, had not been unkind. There was nothing stopping her from picking up her bag and walking back down the red mud road to the 2-room house she rented in town, and going back to the reading she did for hire, and the careful arithmetic of surviving. Except that she had walked 4 miles in summer heat to get here, and her father had walked into this estate 7 years ago carrying the same ledger, and he had never walked back out of it the same man. So when the housekeeper appeared in the kitchen doorway and said, "He'll see you now, miss," Clara picked up her bag, smoothed her plain cotton dress with both hands, and stood up. She did not check her reflection. There was no point. She knew what she looked like. The 30 women were still filing out through the front of the hall when Clara came in through the side door, and for a moment the 2 groups crossed paths in the awkward way of people who belong to completely different stories and know it. A woman in pale green silk glanced at Clara's dress and looked away. Clara did not look at any of them. She walked to the center of the room and stopped. Nathaniel Whitmore was standing by the window, his back half turned, watching the carriages begin to pull away from the front of the estate. He turned when he heard her come in, and for a moment, he simply looked at her. She was younger than he'd expected. 26, perhaps. Her hair was the color of dark honey, pinned simply with a strand that had come loose from the walk and was curling against her temple in the heat. Her dress was clean, but plain cotton, not silk, and the kind of plain that came from careful washing rather than neglect. She carried a canvas bag over one shoulder. She was not beautiful in the way that the word is used to stop conversation. She was the kind of woman you might overlook in a crowded room and then find your eyes returning to without knowing why. She looked at him the way very few people had looked at him in a very long time without performance. "Mr. Whitmore," she said. Her voice was steady. "Miss—" He let the word hang, asking. "Bennett. Clara Bennett." Something shifted in his expression. A quick movement behind his eyes, barely visible, but there. "Bennett," he repeated. "Yes, sir." He studied her for another moment. Then, "You know why you're here?" "I was told you were looking for a wife," Clara said. "I was also told you intended to ask a question." "That's right." "Then ask it," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Around them the estate was settling into the particular quiet of midday, in summer, the distant sounds of work outside, the occasional movement of staff in the corridor, the heat sitting heavy on everything. A hungry farmer. Nathaniel said, "Living on the edge of my property steals food from my kitchen storehouse. My estate manager tells me the man must be punished. He says, if I let it pass, order breaks down. Every tenant on the land will help themselves. What would you do? Clara was quiet. Not the quiet of uncertainty. The quiet of a woman who is thinking carefully because she believes the question deserves it. Then she said, before I decided what to do about the theft, I would want to know why your house had enough food to keep a storehouse full while your neighbor was hungry enough to steal. The silence that followed was not the silence of an empty room. It was the silence of something landing. Nathaniel did not move for a moment. He was looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. Not anger, not surprise exactly, but something working behind his eyes that he was not quite finished with yet. That is not an answer to the question, he said. It is the beginning of one, Clara replied. The question was about punishment. The question was about justice, she said. Punishment is one word for what happens when justice fails, and no one noticed in time. Nathaniel turned slightly, as if he needed a second to arrange something in his own mind. Then he looked back at her. What would you do? He asked again, quietly. The same words, but something different in them, now less like a test and more like a genuine inquiry. I would go to the farmer, Clara said. I would ask him about his children. I would find out what debt or drought or illness put him in a position where stealing was the least terrible of his options. And then, she paused. Then I would look at my own records, because a man does not arrive at starvation quietly. Something failed before he reached my kitchen. And the manager? Nathaniel asked. Who is telling me an example must be made? Clara looked at him steadily. I would ask the manager why he knows so much about this man's theft and so little about this man's hunger. Nathaniel was quiet. Then he said, that is a dangerous thing to say in this house. I am aware, Clara said. Then why say it? She held his gaze. Because you asked. Nathaniel asked her to stay. Not the way he had meant to ask someone to stay, not with the formality of a continued interview or the polite machinery of courtship. He simply said, when she moved to pick up her bag, Miss Bennett, wait. She waited. He gestured to the chair nearest the window, not the chairs arranged in the arc, which had already been removed by 2 footmen while they were talking, but a single chair set slightly apart beside a small table. Sit, he said. Please. The word please came out differently than the rest of what he said, like something he had to find before he could say it. Clara sat. He sat across from her, and for a moment neither of them spoke, and the summer heat pressed against the glass of the window behind him, and somewhere outside a horse shifted and stamped. Your name is Bennett, he said. Yes. Robert Bennett's daughter. A pause. Yes. Nathaniel's hands resting on his knees pressed slightly. Your father worked for this estate. He kept your books, Clara said. For 11 years. Until 7 years ago. Until 7 years ago, she said. The air between them was different now. Not hostile, something more careful than that. He left the position, Nathaniel said. He was removed from it, Clara said. There was a silence. I was in Boston, Nathaniel said. His voice was quieter. When that happened, I was handling matters at my uncle's estate. My manager. He stopped. Mr. Blackwell, Clara said. Yes. He looked at her. My manager handled the estate affairs in my absence. I know, she said. My father wrote me letters. Every week for the last 4 months he was here. He told me what he had found in the accounts. He told me what he was going to do about it. She looked down at the canvas bag in her lap. The last letter he sent, he said he had spoken to Mr. Blackwell directly, that he had given him the opportunity to correct the records before my father brought the matter to you. I never received any such report. No, Clara said. You wouldn't have. The words sat between them like something placed very deliberately on a table. Nathaniel was looking at her with the focused stillness of a man who is assembling something in his mind and needs to be careful not to rush it. "Are you telling me," he said slowly, "that your father brought evidence of wrongdoing to Edward Blackwell? And that Blackwell—" "My father lost his position the following week," Clara said. "He was told he had made errors in the accounts himself, that the discrepancies were his own mistakes, that he was unreliable." She kept her voice even, but something in it had thinned slightly, the way ice thins at the edges of a pond in late winter. "He died the following spring. He did not have enough money to see a physician." Nathaniel did not look away from her. "I am sorry," he said. It was the first sentence he'd spoken that did not have the shape of a careful man managing a conversation. It sounded like something unguarded. Clara looked at him for a moment. "You didn't know," she said. "No. That is either true," she said, "or it is a very good thing to say." He almost smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who has not practiced the expression recently and is slightly surprised to find himself making it. "You don't trust me," he said. "Mr. Whitmore," Clara said. "I walked into the house where my father was destroyed because I carried his ledger in my bag, and I had nowhere else to bring it. I have been surviving on reading other people's books for 3 years. I am not in a position to afford the luxury of trust." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. Then, "You brought the ledger here?" "Yes." "Why?" Clara looked at him steadily. "Because my father trusted you," she said. "Not Blackwell. You. He said in his letters, the ones I still have, that if he could only reach you directly, if Blackwell hadn't gotten between them." She stopped, breathed. "He said you were a fair man." "He may have been mistaken," Nathaniel said. "He may have been," Clara agreed. "But I am here, so I suppose I decided to find out." Done. The ledger sat on the table between them. It was old. 7 years of careful storage in a box beneath Clara's bed had kept it from deteriorating, but the cover was worn, and the pages had the particular softness of paper that has been handled many times by careful hands. Her father's handwriting covered the pages in the neat small script of a man who had been trained to record everything precisely. Nathaniel turned the pages slowly. He did not speak for several minutes. Clara watched him. She had not brought the ledger here expecting this moment to feel the way it did. Something held tight for years, finally placed in someone else's hands. She had expected to feel relief perhaps, or vindication, or fear. She felt all three. She could not have separated them. "These dates," Nathaniel said finally, not looking up. 1808 through 1811, Clara said. "The period before my father was removed. These transfers," he pointed to a page. "This account. Blackwell's personal account," Clara said. "Cross-referenced with the estate's relief fund. The money that was designated for tenant assistance, emergency provisions, medical costs, repairs was being redirected." "To where?" "That," Clara said. "I don't know exactly. My father didn't know. He knew the money was disappearing from the fund. He didn't know where it was going." She paused. "He suspected it was supporting Blackwell's other interests. There are men in the county who have benefited from Blackwell's goodwill in ways that don't quite make sense given their own known finances." Nathaniel turned another page. His expression had settled into something very still and very controlled. "Why?" he said quietly. "Did you wait 7 years to bring this here?" It was a fair question. It was also, Clara realized, a harder question than it appeared. "I was 20 when my father died," she said. "I had no money. I had no connections. I had a ledger that could be dismissed as the work of a disgruntled employee who had been let go for his own errors." She looked at the ledger in his hands. "Blackwell is trusted. He is respected. He has been running this estate for 15 years. A girl with a dead father's account books." She paused. "Who would I have gone to?" "You came to me," Nathaniel said. "I came to you," she said, "because you asked 30 women a question about justice, and from everything I had heard, You had never asked anyone that question before today. She met his eyes. Something changed. I wanted to know what. Nathaniel looked at her for a long moment. My brother, he said, died 2 years ago. Clara had not expected that. I'm sorry, she said. Thomas. Nathaniel set the ledger down carefully. He was 34. He had been ill for some time, a fever that came and went that we were told was manageable. We paid for doctors, we followed their instructions. He was quiet for a moment. He died in February of 2013, in winter. He looked at the window where the summer heat was white against the glass. After he died, I came back here from the northern properties, and I began reading the estate's records myself, for the first time in years. And I found irregularities, small things, the kind of small things that only look small until you add them together. What kind of things? Clara asked. Medical disbursements for tenants, Nathaniel said. Funds that I had specifically set aside after Thomas died, because I did not want another person on this land to die, because they could not afford a doctor. The fund was in place. He stopped. But the doctors were not being sent. The money was being recorded as spent, and the people were going without. Clara felt something cold move through her despite the heat. How many? She asked. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Too many, he said. More than I have confirmed. I have been trying to investigate quietly because if Blackwell knows I am looking... He stopped. The man has connections I cannot fully map. If I move against him without evidence, without something that cannot be disputed. The ledger, Clara said. He looked at her. My father's ledger, she said. It's 7 years old, but it establishes the pattern. It shows it has been happening since at least 1808. That is not an accident. That is a system. Nathaniel looked at the ledger on the table between them. Miss Bennett, he said, if I accept what you are telling me, and if I move on this, Blackwell will fight it, Clara said. Yes. He will discredit your father. He already did, she said. What is he going to do, kill him twice? Something flickered in Nathaniel's expression. Not quite a smile. Something more like recognition. You are not what I expected, he said. I am aware, Clara said. I'm also the only person who has walked into this house in the last 7 years with evidence your manager has been stealing from you and from your people. She looked at him levelly. What were you expecting? He was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm not sure, he said. I suppose I expected someone with less to lose. I have nothing left to lose, Clara said. That is not the same thing as nothing at stake. He looked at her for a long moment. You'll need to stay, he said. While I review the ledger, I will have questions. I have answers, Clara said. I have had 7 years to memorize every page. And your other, he paused. Your work, the reading. Can wait, she said. Nathaniel nodded once the same way he had nodded at each of the 30 women before her. But there was something different in it now, something less conclusive, and more like the beginning of a long reckoning. Margaret will show you to a room, he said. You will take your meals with the household staff. That is fine. And Miss Bennett. She paused, bag in hand. Blackwell will be at supper tonight, Nathaniel said. He is at the estate most evenings. Clara met his eyes. I know what Edward Blackwell looks like, she said. My father described him in his letters. Then you understand, Nathaniel said. Say nothing, not yet. I understand. This will take time, he said. If it is done quickly and clumsily, it will not hold. My father tried to do it quickly, Clara said. I have been patient for 7 years. I can be patient a little longer. She moved toward the door. Miss Bennett. She turned. Nathaniel was still standing by the table, the ledger in his hands, and for a moment he looked not old exactly, but tired in the way that men look who have been carrying something heavy for a very long time and have not yet found anywhere safe to set it down. "Your father," he said. Did he believe in his letters? Did he believe this estate could be made right? Clara looked at him for a moment. He said, she replied carefully, that he had never met a man who owned 600 acres and still asked his tenants how their children were by name. She paused. He said that was either a man of genuine conscience or the most skilled performance he had ever witnessed. A beat. He said he had decided to believe it was the former. Nathaniel held her gaze. "And you?" he asked. "What do you believe?" Clara was quiet for just a moment. "I believe," she said, "that I'm still deciding." She walked out. The door closed softly behind her. Nathaniel stood alone in the room with Robert Bennett's ledger open in his hands and the weight of 7 years of silence pressing down on everything, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something shifting beneath it. Not relief, not quite hope, something earlier than hope. The thing that comes just before a man decides to stop pretending the wrong can't be righted. He turned back to the first page of the ledger, sat down, and began to read. Edward Blackwell arrived at supper that evening with the ease of a man who had never once in his life worried about whether he was welcome. That was the first thing Clara noticed about him. Not his face, though she had imagined it many times from her father's letters, and the reality was close enough to the description to be unsettling. Not his clothes, which were fine without being ostentatious. Not even the way he moved through the dining room with the particular comfort of a man who had long since stopped distinguishing between his employer's house and his own. It was the ease. Her father had written, "He smiles the way a lock smiles at a key, only when it wants to open for you." She had been 17 when she read that sentence, and she had not fully understood it. She understood it now. Blackwell was perhaps 55, with silver hair kept neat, and a face that had the kind of broad, settled handsomeness that men accumulate when they are used to being found trustworthy. He had warm eyes, genuinely warm, which was the most dangerous kind, and when he laughed at something one of the footmen said near the door, the laugh reached all the way up. Clara sat at the far end of the long table, where the household staff took their meals, and she kept her eyes on her plate, and her hands steady, and she did not look at Edward Blackwell more than twice. The second time she looked, he was watching her, not with suspicion, with curiosity, the light, pleasant curiosity of a man who notices a new face and files it away. He smiled when their eyes met the polite reflex of a confident man and looked away again. Clara looked back at her plate. Her heart was moving too fast. She made it slow down by arithmetic, the same trick her father had taught her when she was a girl and afraid of thunderstorms. Count the things you know for certain. 1, she was in this house. 2, she had given Nathaniel the ledger. 3, Blackwell did not know who she was. 4, she had 7 years of patience behind her, and she was not going to waste it tonight. By the time she reached 10, her hands were steady again. Nathaniel sat at the head of the table at the far end from where she sat, and he did not look at her once during the meal. She understood why. She appreciated the discipline of it. But she also watched him, the set of his shoulders, the way he listened to Blackwell's easy conversation about county business and land prices and the summer harvest, and she could see the thing beneath the stillness. The thin wire of tension running through everything he did not say. He was a better performer than she had expected. She filed that away too. After supper, Blackwell lingered in the hall, and Clara was passing through on her way to the room Margaret had prepared for her when she heard him behind her. "Miss." She stopped, turned. Blackwell stood a few feet away, holding a glass of bourbon, his expression easy and open as a summer field. "I don't believe we've been introduced," he said. "Edward Blackwell. I manage the estate." "Clara," she said, "I've been brought on to assist with the household records." It was the story Nathaniel had told Margaret to circulate. Simple, reasonable. The kind of cover story that works because it is boring. Blackwell tilted his head slightly. "Records," he said, "are ours in disorder. Some of the older files need organizing," she said. "Nothing significant." He looked at her for a moment, that same pleasant measuring look, and then smiled again. "Well," he said, "if you have any questions about how things are run here, don't hesitate to ask. I know this estate better than anyone. "I'm sure you do," Clara said. She smiled back, said goodnight, and walked up the stairs at exactly the pace of a woman with nothing on her mind. She did not breathe properly until she reached the top. She found the note under her door at 9:30, a single line in handwriting she was beginning to recognize. Study. 1 hour. She went. The study was at the back of the house, a room she had not seen during her brief tour with Margaret, smaller than the main office, lined with shelves lit by 2 oil lamps that cast the room in amber. Nathaniel was already there when she arrived, the ledger open on the desk in front of him, and 3 additional account books stacked beside it, each one flagged with strips of paper. He looked up when she came in. He looked like a man who had not stopped reading since she left him 4 hours ago. "Sit," he said. She sat across from him. "Tell me about the relief fund," he said. "Start from the beginning. Everything your father told you." So she did. She talked for nearly an hour. Not from notes, she did not need notes. She had read her father's letters so many times over 7 years that the information lived in her the way scripture lives in someone who was raised on it, available without reaching precise under pressure. She told him about the tenant assistance fund that Nathaniel's own father had established in 1801, money set aside each year for emergencies, for the kind of disasters that could ruin a farming family in a single season. She told him how the fund had been administered through Blackwell's office, how the disbursements were recorded in a secondary ledger that her father had been given limited access to in 1808. She told him what her father found when he looked carefully, small discrepancies at first, the kind that could be chalked up to arithmetic error, then larger ones, then a pattern, money going out of the fund that had no corresponding record of where it went. Tenants who had applied for assistance and been told the fund was depleted in years, when the records showed it should have had reserves. And separate from that, a thread her father had only begun to pull before he was removed, payments made to a series of names that appeared nowhere else in the estate's records. Nathaniel listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he opened one of the flagged account books and turned it toward her. "These names," he said, pointing to a column. "Do you recognize any of them?" Clara leaned forward and looked. Her eyes moved down the list slowly. Then she stopped. "Holt," she said. "Yes." "James Holt," she said. "My father mentioned him. He's a magistrate." "He was a magistrate," Nathaniel said. "He retired last year. His son now holds the position." Clara looked up at him. "His son," she said. "Daniel Holt," Nathaniel said. 29 years old, appointed 6 months after his father stepped down. No prior legal experience beyond reading at his father's knee. He paused. His appointment was supported by a letter of recommendation from Edward Blackwell. The room was very quiet. "He's been buying protection," Clara said. The words came out flat and certain, because they were. "For at least 15 years, by what I can trace," Nathaniel said. "Possibly longer. The early records are—" He stopped. "They are incomplete in ways that are not accidental." Clara pressed her hands flat on the desk. "This is larger than what my father found," she said. "Yes. He only saw the theft from the fund. He didn't know about the magistrate." "He may not have had time to find it," Nathaniel said. There was something careful in the way he said it. Something that carried weight without wanting to put it down too loudly. Clara understood what he was not saying. "If Blackwell had a magistrate in his pocket," she said slowly, "then even if my father had gone to the law directly—" "It would have gone nowhere," Nathaniel said. "Or worse." She sat with that for a moment. All these years she had believed the obstacle was simply power. Simply Blackwell's position and her father's lack of one. She had not considered that the law itself had been arranged against her father before he ever tried to reach it. "He didn't know," she said mostly to herself. "He went to Blackwell because he thought that was the right step. He didn't know the next step was already blocked." "No," Nathaniel said quietly. "He didn't." Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then, "How did your brother die?" The question came out before she had fully decided to ask it. She heard it in the air and almost pulled it back. It was not her question to ask. She barely knew this man, but Nathaniel did not flinch. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Fever," he said. "That is what we were told. A recurring fever treatable with the right physician." He looked at the account books on the desk. There was a doctor, a good one in Charlottesville, a man I had specifically arranged for, specifically paid for, through the estate's medical accounts. He stopped. Thomas was at the Eastern property when he took ill. Blackwell handled the arrangements. The doctor... His voice stayed controlled, but just barely. The doctor was never sent. A note was written indicating he had been contacted and had recommended rest and simple remedies. The payment was recorded. He looked up. Thomas died in February. The doctor in Charlottesville, when I finally found him 2 years later, had no record of any contact with this estate. Clara felt the air leave her lungs. "Nathaniel." She said his first name out of her mouth before she could stop it, and neither of them acknowledged it, but neither pretended they hadn't heard it. "I cannot prove it," he said. "I have looked for 2 years, and I cannot assemble the chain completely. What I have are missing records, a payment to a doctor who never came, and a timeline that does not hold together under examination." His voice was very quiet. "And I have Blackwell, who expressed such sincere grief at Thomas's funeral that 3 women wept." Clara was looking at him, and she was thinking about her father, who had died in the spring with a cough he couldn't shake, and no money for a physician, and about the relief fund that should have had reserves, and about how many people on this land had gone without help in years when the record said the fund was not depleted. She was thinking about how a system of harm does not look like a system from the inside. It looks like bad luck, like illness, like the ordinary cruelty of a world that was never fair to begin with. "He didn't just steal money," she said. "No," Nathaniel said. "He stole people." The words came out rough. "Every person who needed help and didn't get it. Every family that applied to the fund and was told it was empty. Every..." She stopped. "Your brother." "I cannot prove that," Nathaniel said again. But the way he said it told her everything about what he believed. "Then we prove what we can," she said. "We build the case from the foundation up. The fund, the names, the magistrate's son. We find the tenants who were turned away. We get their accounts on record." She was leaning forward without realizing it, her hands pressed flat on the desk. "Blackwell has been running this for 15 years because no one has ever assembled the whole picture at one time. The pieces exist, they're just scattered." Nathaniel looked at her with an expression that was hard to name, not hope exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something that a man reaches for when he has been alone with a heavy thing for a very long time, and someone else finally puts their hands on it too. "You said your father trusted me," he said. "That he believed I was a fair man." "He did." "What would he say now," Nathaniel asked, "if he could see this room?" Clara thought about her father, about his careful handwriting and his stubborn, quiet conviction that the truth was worth the cost of speaking it. "He would say," she replied, "that you are running out of time, and that running out of time is not an excuse to move carelessly." A pause. "And then he would pour himself a bourbon and stay up until midnight working on the accounts." Something crossed Nathaniel's face. She thought it might have been grief, or the kind of warmth that lives just beside grief, or perhaps the two were the same thing in a room like this. "I don't have bourbon," he said, "but I have 3 more ledgers to get through before morning." "Then we'd better start," Clara said. Yeah. They worked until the clock struck 2. Clara cross-referenced dates and names, while Nathaniel traced payment flows through the account books, and they spoke to each other in the shorthand of people who are working too hard and too fast to bother with formality. She would find a name and read it aloud. He would check it against his records and either nod or mark it for follow-up. Once she found a discrepancy so blatant a disbursement to the same fictitious name recorded twice in the same month, clearly a clerical error on Blackwell's part, a small slip in an otherwise careful system, that she said, there so sharply that Nathaniel looked up from across the desk and said, What? He made a mistake, she said, turning the ledger toward him. Right there, March 1812, the same entry twice. He corrected it in ink, but the first entry is still visible if you hold it to the light. Nathaniel took the book and held it to the lamp. The original entry was faint, but legible. That's his handwriting, Nathaniel said. His voice had something new in it, something that had been wound very tight for a long time and was just beginning to give. He wrote both entries himself. That is not a copying error. He was processing the money directly. He didn't trust anyone else to do it, Clara said. Which means the records exist somewhere in his own handwriting. Every transaction. He had to keep his own books to track what he was doing. Nathaniel looked at her. If those books exist, they are somewhere in this house, she said, or somewhere on this property. A man like Blackwell does not keep that kind of record off-site. He needs to be able to access it. He needs it close. He has rooms here, Nathaniel said, when he stays late, which is often. Then the records are here, Clara said. They looked at each other across the desk, across the amber light of 2 oil lamps, and the wreckage of 7 years of accumulated wrong, laid out in open books between them. We cannot search his rooms, Nathaniel said. No, Clara agreed. Not yet. And if he finds out what we're doing... He has a magistrate, Clara said. I know. But you own this land. You are his employer. There are things that can be done before that becomes a factor if we do them correctly. Such as, we need witnesses, she said. Tenants who were denied assistance. People who can speak to what they experienced. Not evidence that can be dismissed as a bookkeeping error. People. Voices. The kind of testimony that a new magistrate, if we can find one who isn't in Blackwell's pocket, cannot simply set aside. There are men in this county I trust, Nathaniel said slowly. Men who were friends of my father. Men who are not connected to Blackwell. Start there, Clara said. Quietly, one at a time. And in the meantime, Clara said, I am the woman hired to organize old records. I have a reason to be in the estate's files. I have a reason to ask questions. I have a reason to move through this house without raising suspicion. She paused. Let me do that. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. You understand what happens if Blackwell realizes what you are doing before we are ready? Yes, she said. He has resources. I know. Your father. I know, she said more quietly. I know exactly what he did to my father. That is not a reason to stop. It is the reason I started. He held her gaze. There was something in his expression that she was beginning to learn to read, a particular quality of attention, the way he looked when something had landed in a way he had not expected, and he was taking a moment to absorb it rather than respond to it. You are either very brave, he said, or very reckless. My father would have said there isn't always a difference worth making, Clara replied. This time the thing that crossed his face was unmistakable. It was not quite a smile, but it was the thing that a smile is made of, something quiet and genuine and slightly surprised at itself. Get some sleep, he said. We start again in the morning. One more thing, she said, already rising from the chair. What? Blackwell looked at me at supper, she said. He introduced himself. He asked about my work here. Nathaniel went still. He wasn't suspicious, she said quickly. He was curious. The kind of curious that comes from noticing a new face and wanting to account for it. But he will look again. And the second time he will be more careful. What are you telling me? I'm telling you that we have perhaps 2 weeks, she said, before a man as careful as Blackwell decides I am worth investigating. And when he does, it will not take him long to find out who my father was. The stillness in Nathaniel's expression had become something harder. Then we don't waste the 2 weeks, he said. No, Clara said. We don't. She moved toward the door. Miss Bennett. She turned. He was standing now, the account book still open on the desk behind him, and he looked. She would think about this later in the room Margaret had prepared for her. lying awake in the summer heat. He looked like a man at the edge of something. Not falling, not stepping back, just standing at the edge and finally looking down. "Your father's ledger," he said. "It's been in your possession for 7 years. Yes. You carried it 4 miles on a summer morning to bring it here. Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "Why today?" he said. "Why now after 7 years?" Clara looked at him. "Because you asked 30 women a question about justice," she said, "and I heard that you sent them all away unsatisfied." She paused. A man who is looking for the right answer is a man who still believes the right answer exists. I had not been sure of that in a very long time. She walked out. Behind her, she heard him sit back down. Heard the soft sound of a page turning. He was still reading when she reached the top of the stairs. The next 3 days moved in a rhythm that felt both unbearably slow and terrifyingly fast. By day, Clara moved through the estate's filing room with the methodical patience of a woman being paid to organize records, which she was in a manner of speaking, and she was very good at it. She asked questions that were obvious enough to be innocent and specific enough to be useful. She learned where files were stored, which records were current and which had been archived, and most importantly, she began to map the particular architecture of Edward Blackwell's presence in the estate's paperwork. He was everywhere. That was the first thing she understood. The fund records, the property accounts, the maintenance logs, the correspondence with county officials. Blackwell's hand was in all of it, not obtrusively, but consistently. He had made himself indispensable in the way that is most dangerous, not by appearing to control everything, but by ensuring that nothing could function without him. She wrote down what she observed in a small notebook she kept in her dress pocket. Short notes abbreviated meaningless to anyone who did not know what they were cataloging. By night, she and Nathaniel met in the study. They did not discuss the investigation at dinner. They did not acknowledge each other more than the social obligation of a house required. But every evening, when the house had settled, and Blackwell had either retired to his rooms or departed for his own home in town, she learned to read the sounds of the house well enough to know which she would find the note under her door, and she would go. On the second night, she found him pacing when she arrived. "Sit," she said, which surprised both of them. It was the word he'd used with her on that first day, and she said it without thinking, and he stopped pacing and looked at her with an expression of such startled recognition that she almost laughed. She did not laugh, but she almost did. "What happened?" she said. "I spoke to one of the tenants today," he said. "Samuel Greer. His family has been on this land for 20 years. His wife was ill 2 winters ago, badly ill, the kind of ill where you know it could go wrong. He applied to the relief fund. He was told it was depleted." He stopped. "The records for that quarter show a nearly full reserve." Clara felt the familiar cold weight of it. "He has a family. 3 children, his wife recovered." Nathaniel said it like something that required acknowledgement, the small specific miracle of it. But he didn't know that she would. And he sat in that house for 3 months watching her get worse, being told there was no money for a doctor, while the money sat in an account and went somewhere else. "Will he speak to it?" Clara asked. "He will," Nathaniel said. He is not a man who scares easily, but he is also a man who knows what the Holt name means in this county." "The magistrate," she said. "Daniel Holt has jurisdiction over property disputes in this district," Nathaniel said. "Samuel knows that. He knows that if he accuses Blackwell openly, and Holt sides with Blackwell." He stopped. "He has 20 years on this land. He could lose his tenancy." "He could lose more than that," Clara said quietly. Yes, they were quiet for a moment. "We need more than Samuel," Clara said. "We need enough voices that it becomes too costly to silence all of them. 1 man can be pressured, 10 men are harder, 20 men. 20 men are a problem that even a magistrate in someone's pocket cannot easily solve," Nathaniel said. "How many families on this land?" 47 tenant households, Nathaniel said, plus laborers, plus staff. How many of them applied to the fund in the last 10 years and were turned away? Nathaniel looked at the account books. I have been cross-referencing. As many as I can trace. He stopped. At least 30. Probably more. These records are not complete. 30 families, Clara said. 30 families, he confirmed. She thought about that. About 30 families told there was nothing, no help, no money, no relief, while Blackwell recorded the money as spent and sent it somewhere else. Start with Samuel, she said. Ask him who among the other tenants he trusts. Let it spread the way it needs to spread person to person quietly without Blackwell hearing about it before we're ready. That will take time. Yes, she said. But done wrong, it takes forever. On the third night, the rhythm broke. Clara was crossing the back corridor on her way to the study when she nearly walked directly into Edward Blackwell. She stopped. He stopped. For a fraction of a second in the dim lamp-lit corridor, they stood 2 feet apart. Miss Clara, he said, smooth as river water, not surprised or not showing it. Working late. The filing room, she said. Her voice came out even. I lost track of time. He looked at her with those warm, measuring eyes. You are very dedicated, he said. The records are in a particular state, she said. So I've heard. A beat. Though I confess I don't quite recall a request being put in for additional help with them. I usually handle administrative matters. Another beat. I must have missed the instruction from Mr. Whitmore. I can't speak to how the request was made, Clara said. I was simply told my services were needed. Blackwell tilted his head slightly, not unfriendly, just attentive. Of course, he said. Well, don't let me keep you. And Miss Clara, she was already moving past him. If you have any questions about how the records are organized, the older files especially, please feel free to come to me. Thank you, she said without turning. I'll keep that in mind. She walked to the end of the corridor and turned the corner and stopped. Her heart was going very fast. She counted to 10. He had said the older files especially. He knew. Not who she was, not yet. But he knew she had been looking at old records, which meant he had been watching her more carefully than she had realized, which meant they had less than 2 weeks. They might have days. She went to the study and opened the door, and Nathaniel looked up and read her face immediately. What happened? She told him. He was quiet for a moment after she finished. The kind of quiet that is not stillness, but the compression of something. He's watching you, he said. He's been watching me since supper the first night, she said. But tonight he let me know it, which means he wants you to know he's watching, Nathaniel said. He's not suspicious yet. He's warning you. He's very good at warnings that don't sound like warnings, Clara said. Yes, Nathaniel said. He is. They looked at each other across the desk. How many tenants have you spoken to? She asked. 5, he said. Samuel and 4 others he vouched for. Will they all speak? 4 of the 5, yes. Then we need to move faster, she said. We don't have time to be cautious about the pace. Moving faster increases the risk that Blackwell finds out before we're ready. Not moving faster, Clara said, guarantees that he finds out and stops it. She looked at him directly. You know what he did to my father, Nathaniel. He doesn't give warnings more than once. The use of his first name again natural this time, neither of them flinching. I know, he said. Then we need the tenants. We need every voice we can get, and we need them ready. And we need to find those private records, the books he's kept himself before he has a reason to move them. If I search his rooms without cause, you won't have to, Clara said. Something was coming together in her mind as she spoke a shape she'd been circling for 3 days without seeing the center of. He keeps the books close. He's in this house most evenings, but he's not always in his rooms. She paused. There are times when he is occupied. Supper, Nathaniel said slowly. Every evening, she said. He is at your table for no less than an hour. Clara. His voice had an edge in it, not disapproval, but the specific warning of a man who has begun to care about what happens to someone and is not entirely ready to admit it. If he finds you in his rooms—" "He won't," she said. "You don't know that." "I know how long supper is," she said. "I know what I'm looking for. And I know that if we wait until we're perfectly safe, we will be waiting until after he has already decided what to do about me." Nathaniel was looking at her with that expression again, the one she was beginning to recognize as the particular way his face looked when he was trying very hard not to say something that mattered too much to say carelessly. "I should be the one to go," he said. "You should be at the supper table," she said. "Sitting with him, talking, making sure he does not leave early." "Clara, Nathaniel." She said his name quietly, firmly, the way you say someone's name, when you need them to stop arguing and listen. "My father spent 11 years in this house. He walked its corridors. He kept its books. He raised me on stories of what this place was supposed to be." She stopped for a moment. "Let me finish what he started. Let me do this part." The room was very quiet. He looked at her for a long moment. In the amber light of the lamps, his face was worn and very human, stripped of the carefully maintained distance she had watched him carry for 3 days, and for the first time, she thought she could see all the way through it, through the cold exterior, and the controlled precision, and the long, careful grief to the man beneath who had lost his brother, and not been able to call it what it was, who had been sitting alone with the weight of this house for years, who had asked 30 women a question about justice, and found 30 different ways of being told that justice was not his problem to worry about. "Be back before the meal is over," he said. "I will be," she said. She stood and moved toward the door. "And Clara?" She turned. "Be careful." She nodded once, the same single nod he used. She realized the one she had watched him give 30 women, and had seen him give her, and had not understood until this moment was not a dismissal. It was an acknowledgement. A way of saying, "I heard you. I believe you. Go." She went. Clara moved through the upper corridor with the quiet, purposeful step of someone who belongs exactly where she is, not hurrying, not hesitating, because both of those things draw eyes. Blackwell's rooms were at the east end of the house, past the linen closet and the small sitting room that nobody used. She had mapped the location 3 days ago casually, the way you map things when you are being careful not to look like you are mapping things. She had asked Margaret which rooms needed fresh linens on her second morning at the estate, and Margaret had told her without suspicion, because it was the kind of question a woman hired to help with household organization might reasonably ask. She reached the door and stopped, listened. The sounds of the house below her, voices from the dining room, the distant clatter of serving dishes, told her supper had been underway for perhaps 15 minutes. Blackwell ate slowly. He was the kind of man who enjoyed a meal the way he enjoyed everything, thoroughly, without rushing, confident that the world would wait for him. She had 40 minutes, maybe 45. She opened the door and went in. The room was neat in the way that a careful man keeps things neat, not the neatness of order, but the neatness of concealment. Everything in its place, nothing left out, the surface of the room presenting a face as smooth and readable as Blackwell's own expression at supper. She did not waste time looking at surfaces. Her father had kept his own private records in a box beneath his work table, locked with a key he wore on a cord around his neck. It was a practical man's solution, accessible but not obvious. She did not think Blackwell was that sentimental about physical proximity. But she thought he was a man who needed to know his records were retrievable quickly, which meant somewhere in this room, not in another building, not locked away in a bank vault in Richmond. She checked the desk first. The drawers were unlocked, which told her immediately the important things were not in the desk, because a man who locks nothing is a man with nothing worth locking, and a man who locks everything announces that he has something to protect. Blackwell had left the drawers unlocked because the drawers contained nothing. She moved to the wardrobe, nothing behind it, nothing beneath it, the bookshelf. She ran her fingers along the spines, not reading the titles, feeling for the particular weight of books that have been handled recently versus books that have not been touched in years. Dust distribution told its own story. 3 books on the second shelf from the bottom had been moved recently. She could feel it in the slight disturbance of the dust on the shelf's edge. She pulled them out. Behind them, pushed to the back of the shelf, was a flat leather case. Not a box, a case the kind used for documents about 12 inches wide and 2 inches thick with a brass clasp. Her hands were steady when she opened it. Inside were 4 small ledgers, each one dated on the inside front cover, in handwriting she recognized from the duplicate entry she and Nathaniel had found 2 nights ago. Blackwell's handwriting. Careful, even the handwriting of a man who had been taught that legible records were a virtue. He had kept records of everything. Every diversion, every name, every payment. 7 years of meticulous documentation of a theft conducted with the patience and precision of a man who had never once believed he would be caught. She did not have time to read it all. She had not expected to. She took the notebook from her dress pocket and opened to a fresh page and began copying quickly, efficiently, the way her father had taught her to take notes when he was training her to read accounts. Not every entry. The key entries, the names, the dates, the amounts, the recurring patterns that would be visible to anyone who knew what they were looking at. She worked for 25 minutes. Her hand cramped. She kept writing. When she had what she needed, she closed the leather case, replaced it behind the 3 books, replaced the books, and stood up. Then she stopped. Because the sounds from downstairs had changed. Not dramatically, not the sound of a chair being pushed back or voices being raised. Just a shift in the rhythm of the meal, a settling of sounds that meant the serving dishes were being cleared, which meant supper was ending, which meant she had used more time than she thought. She crossed the room, cracked the door, and listened. Footsteps on the stairs. Coming up. Not Blackwell's footsteps, she had learned those in 3 days. The particular measured cadence of a large man who moves slowly because he has never in his life felt the need to hurry. These were lighter, quicker, a footman probably, or Margaret. She waited until the footsteps turned into the south corridor rather than the east. Then she stepped out of the room, pulled the door to behind her, and walked back toward the main corridor with the pace of a woman who has just finished checking on something mundane and is now returning to her own rooms. She passed the footman, not Margaret, the young one, Thomas, in the corridor. "Evening, miss," he said, not stopping. "Evening," she said, not stopping. She turned the corner and allowed herself just for a moment to press her back against the wall and breathe. 28 names in her notebook, 7 years of documentation, 4 ledgers of evidence that Blackwell had been careful enough to keep and careless enough to keep here. She went downstairs to find Nathaniel. He was still at the table when she appeared in the doorway of the dining room. Blackwell sat across from him, bourbon in hand, in the middle of a sentence about the summer wheat yield. And when Nathaniel's eyes found her over Blackwell's shoulder, his expression did not change by a single degree, but his hand resting on the table pressed flat. She gave him the smallest nod. His hand relaxed. She went to the kitchen and asked Delia for a glass of water and sat there for 15 minutes, her notebook in her pocket, until she heard the sounds of Blackwell departing, the particular sequence of a guest taking his leave, the exchange of pleasantries in the front hall, the door. Then she went to the study. Nathaniel was there before her. He was standing rather than sitting, which told her something about how the last hour had felt for him. "Well," he said. She put the notebook on the desk and opened it to the first page of notes. He read in silence. She watched his face as he read. She had become good at reading his face in the past 3 days, the small adjustments of expression that a controlled man allows himself when he is not actively managing how he appears. The slight tightening around his jaw that happened when something landed hard. The brief, almost imperceptible pause in his breathing when he encountered something worse than he expected. He paused twice on the first page. On the second page, he stopped entirely. "This name," he said. His voice was very quiet. He pointed to an entry halfway down. Clara leaned over. "Arthur Linwood," she said. "He appears 5 times in the first ledger alone." "Arthur Linwood," Nathaniel repeated, "is a land assessor for the county. He has assessed every property dispute in this district for the past decade." Clara felt the weight of it settle. "He decides what land is worth," she said. "He decides which tenants can be legally removed and which cannot," Nathaniel said. "He decides the value of contested parcels. He decides—" He stopped. There were 3 families removed from the eastern edge of my property 2 years ago. I was told their tenancy agreements had expired. I was not home. Blackwell handled it. He looked at the notebook. I was told the land assessor had confirmed the removal was legal. Arthur Linwood confirmed it, Clara said. Arthur Linwood confirmed it, Nathaniel repeated. The silence between them was dense with it, the shape of a corruption that had been quietly rearranging the world for years. Buying the assessor who said what land was worth buying, the magistrate who enforced the law, stealing the money, meant for the poor, while the poor were told the money was gone. 3 families, Nathaniel said. I need to find out where they went. After, Clara said. We find them after. Right now we have something more immediate. She pointed to a name near the top of the second page. This one. He looked. James Hartwell. He appears in the first ledger in 1808 and again in your current account books as a supplier. Agricultural equipment paid through the estate. The payments are recorded as estate expenses. She met his eyes. But there is no equipment. I have been through 3 years of maintenance records. Whatever Hartwell is supplying it is not arriving at this estate. Nathaniel set the notebook down. He's been running ghost suppliers, he said. Fictitious payments to real names, real accounts, money flowing out and not coming back. For at least 7 years, she said. Probably longer. The first ledger only goes back to 1808. How much? Clara had done the arithmetic in her head while she was copying the entries. From what I can trace in my notes, and I did not copy everything, at minimum several $1,000s. Possibly significantly more. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. This is not a man stealing to supplement his income, he said. No, Clara said. This is a man who built a second income and ran it through your estate for 15 years. This is a man who understood your family's books better than you did, and used that knowledge as an instrument. She paused. He did not work for you, Nathaniel. You were the apparatus through which he worked for himself. The directness of it landed between them like something dropped from a height. She watched him absorb it, the way a man absorbs something that is both worse and more clarifying than what he had allowed himself to fully believe. My father trusted him, he said. Your father hired a competent manager and then trusted the position, she said. Not unkindly. That is what employers do. That is what Blackwell relied on. And my brother, I cannot say that with certainty, she said. Not from what I found tonight. But Nathaniel... She stopped. The pattern is there. The medical disbursement records for 1813. They are in the ledger. They are entered in his handwriting. And the amount... She touched the notebook near the bottom of the second page. The amount matches what was recorded in your estate's accounts as paid to the physician in Charlottesville. He stood very still. He recorded it, Nathaniel said. He kept a record of it. He kept a record of everything, Clara said, because a man who runs a system of this complexity needs to be able to account for every thread. He needed to know what he had moved and where it had gone and when. He could not afford to lose track. She looked at him steadily. It was the one flaw in the whole design. He was too careful to destroy it. Nathaniel turned away. She let him. Some things need a moment of privacy, even in a shared room. And this was one of them. The moment when a man's worst fear stops being a fear and becomes a fact. She waited. When he turned back, his face had settled into something very hard and very still. The way a river freezes, not because it has stopped moving, but because what is moving is now moving beneath the surface. We have the evidence, he said. We have my handwritten notes of what is in his ledgers, she said. We need the ledgers themselves, which means we need a reason to search his rooms openly with witnesses. And we need someone with legal authority who is not in Blackwell's pocket. I told you there are men in this county. Name one, she said. Name one you are certain of. He thought for a moment. Richard Caldwell, he said. He was my father's attorney. He has no connection to Blackwell that I know of. They have never operated in the same circles. He is in Richmond. Richmond is 3 days by horse. 2 if I ride hard. If you leave the estate for 2 days, Blackwell will not move against you in 2 days, Nathaniel said. He does not yet know what you have found. As far as he is concerned, you are still organizing old files, and I will leave instructions that nothing in the East Wing is to be disturbed. Clara thought about it. The risk on one side 2 days without Nathaniel here, if Blackwell moved faster than expected. The risk on the other side proceeding without legal authority, without a witness who could not be dismissed or bought. 2 days, she said. I will need you back by Thursday evening. I will be back by Thursday evening. And I will keep working, she said. The tenant accounts. I have the names from my notes, the families who were denied from the fund. I will reach Samuel Greer. Be careful how you approach them, he said. If Blackwell has informants among the tenants. Samuel vouched for 4 families, she said. I start there. I don't approach anyone Samuel hasn't already spoken to. He nodded. Then he said, Clara. She looked at him. When I ride to Richmond, he said carefully, I will not explain everything to Caldwell in a letter. I will tell him in person. But I will need to leave something here, something that cannot be lost or moved in case. He stopped. In case something happens before you return, she finished. In case something changes, he said. She understood what he meant. She reached into her pocket and took out the notebook. She looked at it for a moment, her handwriting. Her father's case, 3 nights of careful work, and then she held it out to him. Take it, she said. Copy what you need tonight. Leave me the copy. Ride at first light. He took the notebook from her hand. Their fingers were close for a moment, not touching. Almost touching the narrow air between them, carrying something neither of them named. Your father would have liked this plan, Nathaniel said. My father would have said the plan has too many single points of failure, Clara replied. But he would have agreed it was better than the alternative. He almost smiled. Get some sleep, he said. You too, she said. You have a long ride tomorrow. She left him there copying entries by lamplight and went upstairs and lay in the dark of the summer night thinking about 28 names in a leather ledger and a dead physician who never came and a man who kept records of his own crimes because he never believed anyone would be brave enough to look for them. She did not sleep much. She was in the filing room by 7 in the morning when the house was still in the early business of the day and Blackwell had not yet arrived. Nathaniel had ridden out at 5. She had heard the horse from her room and had lain there listening until the sound faded down the road, and then she had gotten up. She found Samuel Greer at mid-morning. He was working at the edge of the north field, repairing a fence post with the focused attention of a man who puts his energy into the physical thing in front of him when the other things are too large to hold. Clara walked out to him, carrying a written note. The cover story, if anyone asked, was an estate inquiry about fence materials, and when he saw her coming, he straightened and looked at her with the particular wariness of a man who has learned to read strangers carefully. Mr. Greer? She said. Miss, he said. She handed him the note. He read it slowly. Then he looked up at her. Mr. Whitmore sent you, he said. His voice was low. Mr. Whitmore is in Richmond, she said. He will be back Thursday. He asked me to speak with you about the account records, specifically the records from the winter of 1813. Samuel Greer was quiet for a moment. He was perhaps 45, weathered in the way of men who work outdoors with steady, dark eyes and large hands that were holding the fence post with a grip that had nothing to do with the fence post. My wife, he said. Yes, Clara said. I know about your wife. I know you applied to the relief fund. They told me it was gone, he said. Every cent. Told me there was nothing left for the season. My wife lay in bed for 3 months. He stopped. His jaw worked. She near died. Miss, she near died, and they told me there was nothing. There was money in the fund, Clara said quietly. The records show a nearly full reserve for that quarter. The way his face changed, it was not anger at first, or not only anger. It was something more complicated than that, the expression of a man who has been carrying a particular shame for years, The shame of believing that he had not done enough, that he had not found the money. Somehow that his wife's suffering had been the result of his own failure, and who is now being told that the failure was not his. "It was there," he said, "the whole time." "Yes," she said. He set down the fence post. He put both hands flat on the top rail of the fence and looked out at the field. "How many others?" he said. "At least 30 families that we can trace," she said. "Possibly more." "God," he said. It was not profanity. It was the sound of a man struck. "Mr. Greer," Clara said. "When Mr. Whitmore returns, he will be bringing legal counsel. We intend to present this formally to seek a proper accounting and to pursue remedy through the courts." She paused. "We need witnesses. People who will speak to what happened to them on the record formally in a process that cannot be dismissed." "Blackwell's got the magistrate," Samuel said, still looking at the field. "The county magistrate," she said, "but not the state court, and not a judge in Richmond if it comes to that." He turned to look at her. "You think it will come to that?" "I think Edward Blackwell has built this to be very difficult to dismantle," she said. "I think that a formal accounting with multiple witnesses and documentary evidence is the only path that holds. And I think—" She met his eyes. "I think your wife almost died. And I think you deserve to say that in a room where someone has to hear it and answer for it." He was quiet for a long time. "My neighbor Ellis Cooper," he said finally. "His boy needed the doctor 3 summers back. Same story fund, empty, nothing we could do. The boy lost 2 fingers to infection." He paused. "You go talk to Ellis Cooper." "I will," she said. "And the Harmon family, west edge of the property. Old man Harmon died 2 winters ago. They believe it was something that could have been treated. They never got the chance to find out." He looked at her. "You go talk to the Harmons." "I will," she said again. He nodded once, the movement of a man who has made a decision and is not going to revisit it. "You tell me when Whitmore is back," he said. "I'll be ready." She spent the rest of the day moving between the filing room and the tenant families, and each conversation was its own particular weight. Each story, another shape of the same harm, each family carrying the particular exhaustion of people who have grieved something and had no name for what took it from them. Ellis Cooper confirmed Samuel's account and added 2 additional names. The Harmon daughter, a thin, precise woman of 30, who had buried her father and raised her 2 younger brothers on her own, sat across from Clara at her kitchen table and spoke with such controlled clarity that Clara had to fight to keep her own voice steady. "I knew something wasn't right," the Harmon daughter said. "I kept the letters. Every letter we sent applying to the fund. Every response we got. I kept them all because my father always said, keep records. Don't let them tell you something happened that didn't. Don't let them tell you something didn't happen that did." She produced a bundle of letters tied with string. Clara looked at them. "May I take these?" she said. "You may take them," the Harmon daughter said, "if you promise me they will be read in a room where Blackwell has to sit and listen." "I promise," Clara said. It was the kind of promise you make when you mean it absolutely and know the cost of it. The Harmon daughter held her eyes for a moment, measuring her, and then handed over the letters. Clara was back at the estate by late afternoon. She was crossing the main hall with the bundle of letters under her arm when she nearly walked into Blackwell. He was standing near the door to the main office, not doing anything exactly, just present. The way he was often present, positioned without a visible reason in places that gave him a view of the house's movement. "Miss Clara," he said. "Mr. Blackwell," she said. His eyes went to the bundle under her arm. Just a brief flick of attention, smooth as anything, but she caught it. "Busy day," he said. "The East Fields," she said. "Mr. Whitmore asked me to look into some of the older tenant correspondence before he returns." "Tenant correspondence," Blackwell repeated. His voice was pleasant. His eyes were not cold exactly. They were still warm, still doing the thing they always did. But there was a quality of attention behind them that was different from before. More focused, more still. "Old files," she said. "Letters from the early years. Nothing current." "Of course," he said. Though if you have questions about the tenant records, the older ones especially, you really ought to come to me first. I have context for those files that would save you a great deal of confusion." A small smile. "Some of those records are not as straightforward as they appear on the surface." "I'll keep that in mind," she said. "Where is Mr. Whitmore, may I ask?" His tone stayed easy. "I had expected him at breakfast." "Richmond," she said. "Estate business. He'll be back Thursday." Something shifted in Blackwell's expression. Just slightly. The particular shift of a man who has just received information he was already seeking and is filing it away. "Richmond," he said. "Well, if anything comes up that requires direction while he's away, don't hesitate to bring it to me. I am as always here to keep things running smoothly." "Thank you," Clara said, and walked past him and up the stairs. She locked her door behind her and stood in the center of the room and thought very carefully. He knew Nathaniel was gone. He had been watching for it, had probably been watching since the moment supper ended without Nathaniel appearing for the nightly conversation. And now he knew she was in the tenant files with letters under her arm, asking questions she had no obvious reason to be asking. She had maybe until Thursday, maybe less. She sat down at the small writing desk in her room and opened her copy of the notebook and began to organize everything: the notes, the dates, the names, the Harmon letters into a sequence that could be followed by someone who had not been living inside this story for 3 days. A document that could be handed to Richard Caldwell in Richmond and read cold and understood completely. She worked until midnight. At midnight, she heard footsteps in the corridor outside her door. Slow, deliberate. They stopped outside her room. She did not move. She sat at the desk with her pen in her hand and she counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The footsteps moved on. She breathed. Then she heard faint, but unmistakable, the sound of the east corridor door. The door near Blackwell's rooms opening and closing. She was at her own door in 3 steps. She cracked it and looked. The corridor was empty, but the lamp at the far end was swinging slightly. The kind of swing that happens when someone has just passed quickly beneath it. Clara stepped back into her room, closed the door, and looked at the notebook on her desk. If he checked his rooms tonight, if he opened the leather case, counted the ledgers, held them to the light looking for signs of disturbance, she didn't know whether she had left any. She thought about her movements. The books replaced in the same order. The case closed with the same pressure. The dust, she had been careful about the dust, but she had been in a hurry at the end. She sat very still and waited. 15 minutes passed. 20. No footsteps returned to her corridor. She did not know what that meant. Either he had checked and found nothing wrong, or he had not checked, or he had found something and was now deciding what to do about it. She picked up her pen and kept writing. There was nothing else to do. She had 2 days until Nathaniel returned, and she had work to finish, and she was not going to let the fear of what Blackwell might have noticed stop her from doing the thing that needed to be done. Her father had not stopped either. Even at the end, even when he knew Blackwell was watching him, he had kept the ledger and kept the records, and kept believing the truth was worth more than the safety of silence. She understood that now, in a way she had not understood it when she was 20, and reading his last letters and not yet knowing they were his last letters. She wrote until 2 in the morning. When she finally set the pen down, she had a document of 41 pages in her neat, careful hand. Her father's granddaughter in the most essential way, which was that she believed the truth had to be written down, had to be made specific and dated and named, because vague truth is too easy to dismiss, and documented truth is too heavy to bury. She held the pages in her hands. Then she wrapped them in a cloth, tied it with string, and tucked the bundle at the bottom of her traveling bag beneath her extra dress and her father's Bible. If Blackwell came for the notebook, he would find it on the desk where she had left it, the copy with enough information to confirm his fears, but not everything she had organized. The 41 pages were something else. The 41 pages were the whole case assembled and legible and ready for a courtroom. She lay down on the bed without undressing. Thursday, she thought. Just get to Thursday. She closed her eyes. Outside, the summer night pressed against the window, hot and very still. And somewhere in the east wing of Whitmore Estate, Edward Blackwell was awake too, doing his own arithmetic, adding up the things he had noticed and the things he was not yet sure of, moving his pieces across the board with the patient precision of a man who had never once lost a game he had decided to play. The difference between them, Clara thought just before she finally fell asleep, was not intelligence or resources or position. It was that Blackwell was playing to protect what he had taken, and she was playing to return what he had stolen. That had to count for something. It had to. Nathaniel rode back into Whitmore Estate on Thursday evening with mud on his coat and Richard Caldwell beside him. Clara heard the horses from the filing room and was in the front hall before Margaret had finished opening the door. She stopped herself from moving too fast from crossing the hall the way she wanted to cross it with purpose and relief, and the particular urgency of someone who has been holding something heavy alone for 2 days and can finally set it down. She stood near the doorway and waited. Nathaniel came through the door first. He looked at her immediately, not scanning the room, not greeting Margaret directly at her, the way a man looks at the thing he has been thinking about for 2 days of hard riding. "You're all right," he said. It was not quite a question. "I'm all right," she said. Something in him settled. Then he stepped aside and said, "Miss Bennett, this is Richard Caldwell." Caldwell was perhaps 60. A compact man with sharp gray eyes behind wire spectacles and the bearing of someone who had spent 40 years in rooms where precision of language was the difference between justice and its absence. He looked at Clara the way lawyers look at witnesses they have not yet evaluated, not unkindly, but carefully. "Miss Bennett," he said, "Nathaniel has told me a great deal about you." "He told me you were trustworthy," Clara said. "I hope he's right." Caldwell almost smiled. "He told me you would say something like that," he said. Nathaniel looked between them. "Where is Blackwell?" he asked. "He arrived an hour ago," Clara said. "He's in the main office." The three of them exchanged a look that contained an entire conversation. "Then we have perhaps 30 minutes before he knows I'm back," Nathaniel said. "We use them." He looked at Caldwell. "The study." They moved. Clara spread everything on the study desk in the order she had organized it 2 nights ago. The notebook, the copy of her notes, the Harmon letters, the chronological account she had spent until 2 in the morning assembling. Caldwell sat and read without speaking. Nathaniel stood near the door. Clara stood near the desk because she could not make herself sit. The clock on the mantel marked 4 minutes, then 8, then 12. Caldwell turned a page, stopped, turned back, read something again. "The duplicate entry," he said. "March 1812. "Yes," Clara said. "His handwriting in both entries. The original is visible when you hold the page to direct light." "You've confirmed this personally." "I have," Nathaniel said. Caldwell turned another page. He read the Harmon letters in sequence, setting each one to the side as he finished. When he reached the last one, he placed it with the others and removed his spectacles and looked at Clara. "How many witnesses?" he said. 7 families confirmed as of yesterday," she said. "Samuel Greer Ellis Cooper, the Harmon family, and 4 others Samuel vouched for. All have agreed to make formal statements. There are potentially 30 more who were affected. I have their names from the ledger records, but I have not approached them all. 7 is sufficient to establish the pattern," Caldwell said. 30 would be irrefutable." He put his spectacles back on. "The primary evidence problem is the ledgers themselves. Your notes are valuable. They establish that you have seen them, that they exist, and they provide a roadmap for an examiner. But the ledgers must be produced physically." "They're in his rooms," Nathaniel said. "East Wing. I know the location." "You cannot search a man's private rooms without cause," Caldwell said. "He works for me," Nathaniel said. "These are my rooms. This is my house." "A court will ask whether he had a reasonable expectation of privacy in his assigned quarters," Caldwell said. "If the answer is yes, and it may be any evidence retrieved without his consent or a formal order could be challenged. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Clara said, "What if he produces them himself?" Both men looked at her. "What if?" she said slowly, working through it as she spoke. "He is confronted in a setting where he cannot avoid them, where the evidence is presented to him piece by piece in front of witnesses, and the only way to respond is either to confirm it or to deny it in a way that can itself be documented." "You are describing a trap," Caldwell said. "I am describing an accounting," she said. "Nathaniel has the right to call a full review of his estate's records. He has the right to assemble his staff, his tenants, his legal counsel, and conduct a formal audit." She looked at Nathaniel. "If that review produces discrepancies that require explanation, and if Blackwell is present and asked to explain them, he will deny everything," Nathaniel said. "He will try," she said. "But denial requires a story. And his story has to account for 7 witness families, 41 pages of documentation, a duplicate entry in his own handwriting, and a physician in Charlottesville who will confirm he was never contacted." She paused. "Every lie he tells in that room becomes part of the record. And when the ledgers are found, and they will be found because a formal legal review of the estate's records will include his rooms, every lie will have a document that contradicts it." Caldwell looked at her for a long moment. "You have thought about this carefully," he said. "I have had 2 days and very little sleep," she said. He almost smiled again. Then he looked at Nathaniel. "She's right that a formal audit is within your legal authority as the estate's owner, and if Blackwell is present as a party to that audit, anything he says voluntarily becomes admissible." He paused. "The question is timing. How quickly can you assemble the necessary people?" "The witnesses," Nathaniel said, looking at Clara. "Samuel can reach all 7 families by tomorrow morning," she said. "I need 1 hour with him tonight." "The county recorder," Caldwell said. "I will need a neutral party to document proceedings formally. Is there someone in this county who is not connected to Blackwell?" Nathaniel thought for a moment. "James Morrow," he said. "He's been county recorder for 12 years. He and Blackwell have never had dealings that I know of. They move in entirely different circles. Morrow is a small-town man. He has no ambitions that Blackwell could have purchased." "Get Morrow here tomorrow," Caldwell said. "And the witnesses. And anyone else on this estate who has a relevant account to give." He folded his spectacles and placed them in his coat pocket. "We conduct the review the day after tomorrow, Saturday morning." "That's 2 days from now," Nathaniel said. "Which is how long I need to prepare the legal framework," Caldwell said. "If this is done correctly, Blackwell will not walk away from that room with anything left to protect himself with. If it is done too quickly and something is missed, he will find the gap and he will use it. And a man with a magistrate in his pocket and 15 years of practice at this will know exactly how to make a gap into an escape." Nathaniel looked at Clara. Clara thought about the footsteps outside her door, about Blackwell's eyes on the bundle of letters under her arm, about 2 more days of being in this house with him, being watched by him, performing the role of a woman who was simply organizing files while the thing he was afraid of assembled itself in the room next door. 2 days, she said. "I can manage 2 days." "You may not have to manage them alone," Nathaniel said. His voice was quiet. "I'm back now." Something in the way he said it, not a promise exactly, but something more certain than an observation, settled into Clara like a hand placed carefully on a wound. "Good," she said. Yeah. The next 36 hours were the longest Clara had lived since the week her father died. She found Samuel Greer at first light Friday morning before Blackwell had arrived at the estate, and she told him what was happening carefully, completely, in the direct way she had learned Samuel preferred, because he was a man who appreciated being trusted with the full weight of a situation, rather than a managed version of it. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Saturday." "Saturday morning," she said. "The main hall. You and as many of the others as you can reach." He nodded. "I'll reach them all," he said. "Samuel," she said, "Blackwell cannot know, not until he is already in that room." He looked at her steadily. "Miss Bennett," he said, "I have been keeping secrets from that man since my wife almost died. I believe I can manage 2 more days." She believed him. She went back to the estate and spent Friday in the filing room and thought about nothing except the work in front of her, because thinking about Saturday was not useful and the work was. She organized the tenant correspondence into chronological order. She cross-referenced the account names from her notes against the estate's current supplier records and found 4 additional ghost suppliers she had missed in her initial pass. 4 more fictitious names, 4 more payment streams flowing out of the estate and into Blackwell's private accounts. She added them to the 41-page document. At noon, Blackwell appeared in the filing room doorway. Clara did not look up from what she was doing. "Miss Clara," he said. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, still writing. "I understand Mr. Whitmore has returned," he said. "He arrived yesterday evening," she said. "With a guest, I'm told." "An old friend," she said. "Legal matters unrelated to the estate." She turned a page. "I believe they have some family business to settle." A pause. She could feel him in the doorway, the particular quality of his presence, the weight of a man deciding what he believes and what he is going to do about it. "Of course," he said finally. "Well, I hope it all resolves smoothly." Another pause. "You have been very industrious this week, Miss Clara." "The files were in a considerable state," she said. "Yes," he said. "I'm sure they were." He left. She set down her pen and pressed both hands flat on the desk and breathed until her hands stopped shaking. He knew something. Not everything. If he knew everything, he would not be standing in doorways making pleasant conversation. He would be acting. But he was adding things up and he was close, and if he reached his own conclusions before Saturday morning, they would lose the controlled setting that was the one advantage they had. She found Nathaniel at 2 o'clock. "He's close," she said without preamble. Nathaniel looked at her. "How close?" "He doesn't know about Caldwell's involvement," she said. "But he knows I've been in the tenant files. He knows you came back with someone. He is—" She paused. "He is the kind of man who does not move until he is certain. That is both his strength and the thing we are relying on, but his certainty is building." "Saturday is tomorrow morning," Nathaniel said. "I know. Caldwell is ready. Morrow arrives tonight." Samuel confirmed all 7 families. "I know," she said again. "Then we hold 1 more night," he said. "1 more night," she agreed. He looked at her for a moment with an expression that had been building across the past 4 days of careful distance and shared work, and 2 oil lamps and a desk covered in 7 years of accumulated wrong. An expression that was not the controlled stillness she had first read across the main hall, but something underneath it, something that had been present without announcement for longer than either of them had named. "Clara," he said. "Don't," she said, not harshly. "After Saturday. Say it after Saturday." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "After Saturday," he said. She nodded and went back to the filing room. Saturday morning came in with summer heat already pressing before 8 o'clock. Clara was dressed and downstairs before 7. Caldwell was in the study with his papers organized. James Morrow, a slight, precise man of 50, who had brought his own ink and his own paper, and who asked no questions beyond what was legally necessary, which made Clara trust him immediately, sat at the small table near the window, with his recording materials prepared. The 7 families began arriving at 7:30. Samuel came first with his wife, a quiet woman who walked with a slight hesitation from the illness that had almost taken her, who looked at the main hall of Whitmore Estate with the expression of a person entering a place that has owed them something for a long time. Ellis Cooper came with his son, who was missing 2 fingers from his left hand. The Harmon daughter came alone with a second bundle of letters she had found after Clara's visit, and she sat in the front row of the assembled chairs, with her back straight and her hands folded, and the particular composure of a woman who has been angry for years and has finally found somewhere appropriate to put it. By 8 o'clock, 14 people were seated in the main hall. By 8:15, Nathaniel had sent word to Blackwell that his presence was required. He sent no explanation, just the request. Formal from the estate's owner to the estate's manager. The kind of request that a man in Blackwell's position could not decline without raising the very questions he needed to avoid raising. Clara stood near the back of the hall. Not seated, she wanted to be able to move to hand documents to Caldwell when needed to watch the room. Nathaniel stood at the front near the window where she had first walked in a week ago and answered his question and changed everything. They heard Blackwell's footsteps in the corridor. The room went quiet in the particular way of people who have been waiting for something and have now stopped being able to pretend they are not. The door opened. Blackwell walked in and stopped. He took in the room in one long, comprehensive sweep. The 14 tenants, Caldwell at the formal table Morrow, with his recording materials. Nathaniel at the front, Clara at the back. His face went through something. It was fast, well controlled, but Clara was watching for it, and she saw it. It was the expression of a man who has been playing chess for 15 years and has just walked into a room and realized his opponent has seen the whole board. Then it was gone. The warmth came back. The easy assurance. The particular performance of a man who has never once in anyone's memory looked like he had anything to hide. "Nathaniel," he said. "What is all this?" "Sit down, Edward," Nathaniel said. The use of his first name flat without the usual social lubrication was the first signal. Blackwell registered it. He sat down in the empty chair near the door, and his posture was relaxed, and his hands were still, and Clara thought, he is very good. He is genuinely very good. And none of that is going to be enough. Caldwell rose. "Mr. Blackwell," he said. "My name is Richard Caldwell. I am an attorney retained by Mr. Whitmore to conduct a formal review of Whitmore Estate's financial records covering the period from 1805 to the present. This review is being formally recorded by Mr. James Morrow, the county recorder." He gestured toward Morrow. "You are present in your capacity as the estate's manager of record. You are not compelled to speak, but you are requested to cooperate. Any statements you make will be recorded as part of this proceeding." Blackwell looked at Caldwell with an expression of polite attention. "A review," he said. "Of course. I am always available to assist in any review of the estate's records." He glanced at the assembled tenants. "Though I confess I don't quite understand why—" "We'll come to that," Caldwell said. He opened the folder in front of him. "I want to begin with the relief fund established by the late Mr. Whitmore Sr. in 1801. Are you familiar with the fund?" "Entirely," Blackwell said. "I have administered it since 1803. And the disbursements from that fund, those decisions were made by you?" "Under Mr. Whitmore's general direction, yes." "And in quarters, where you determined the fund to be depleted, you would have communicated that to applicants?" "Naturally." Caldwell turned to the first page of his folder. "For the quarter ending December 1813, what was the balance of the relief fund?" A pause. Brief. Almost invisible. "I would need to consult the records to give you a precise figure," Blackwell said. "I have the records here," Caldwell said pleasantly. He produced the account book, one of the ones Clara had cross-referenced with Nathaniel in the first nights. According to the estate's own records, the fund held a balance of $840 at the end of that quarter. "Does that accord with your recollection?" "If that is what the records show," Blackwell said carefully, "then I would not dispute it." Caldwell turned to the tenants. "Mr. Greer," he said, "what were you told when you applied to the relief fund in the winter of 1813? Samuel Greer stood. His voice was steady, and his eyes did not leave Blackwell's face. "I was told the fund was depleted," he said. "Nothing left for the season. I was told to come back in spring." "And your wife's medical situation at that time?" "She was very ill," Samuel said. "We needed a doctor. We needed medicine. We had nothing." He stopped for a moment. "She almost died." "Thank you, Mr. Greer." Caldwell looked at Blackwell. The fund held $840. Mr. Greer was told it was empty. Can you explain that discrepancy? Blackwell's expression did not change. Quarterly balances are recorded at end of quarter, he said. During the quarter, funds may have been committed to other applications that had not yet been disbursed. The balance at the end of the quarter does not necessarily reflect what was available at the moment of Mr. Greer's application. It was a good answer. Clara had anticipated it. She looked at Caldwell. Mr. Cooper, Caldwell said without acknowledging Blackwell's answer. Please stand. Ellis Cooper stood. Beside him, his son sat with his left hand folded in his lap. Your son required medical attention in the summer of 1815, Caldwell said. He did, Cooper said. Cut his hand bad working the field. It needed proper cleaning and care more than we could manage ourselves. We applied to the fund. He looked at Blackwell. We were told it was empty. Summer of 1815, Caldwell said. He turned to a different page. The fund balance at the beginning of that quarter was $1,200. He turned to Blackwell. Also depleted at the moment of application. As I said, Blackwell began. Miss Harmon, Caldwell said. The Harmon daughter stood. She did not look at Caldwell. She looked at Blackwell, and her gaze was so direct and so completely without performance that three people in the room shifted slightly in their chairs. My father died in the winter of 1814, she said. He had been ill for 6 months. We applied to the relief fund 4 times in those 6 months. She reached into her bundle and began placing letters on the table in front of Caldwell one by one. Each time we were told the fund was insufficient. Each time we found another way to manage because we had no other choice. She placed the last letter. My father died in February. The following spring, I discovered he had a treatable condition. A physician we consulted afterward told us that with proper care in those 6 months, he likely would have survived. She stopped. Then, he was 52 years old. The room was absolutely still. Caldwell looked at Blackwell. 4 applications denied, he said. 4 times the fund is described as insufficient. He turned to another page. The estate's records show a full reserve for all 4 of those quarters. He set the page down. Mr. Blackwell, where was the money? And here was the moment. Clara had thought about this moment for 3 days. She had thought about it the way you think about a hinge, the thing everything else turns on. Blackwell's face had not broken. The warmth was still there, or the performance of warmth, which in him had become so practiced that perhaps even he could not tell the difference anymore. I would need to conduct my own review of the records, he said, before I could speak to any specific discrepancies. These are complex accounts covering many years. Any apparent inconsistency likely has a reasonable explanation that will become clear upon thorough examination. I agree, Caldwell said. Let's examine them thoroughly. He opened a second folder. I want to direct your attention to a series of payments recorded in the estate's expense accounts under supplier disbursements. Beginning in 1808, there are regular payments to a supplier named James Hartwell. Agricultural equipment. Are you familiar with these payments? A pause that was fractionally longer than the previous ones. Hartwell supplied equipment to the estate, Blackwell said. When did you last receive a delivery from Mr. Hartwell? I would need to check the delivery records. I have the delivery records, Caldwell said. I have reviewed 3 years of maintenance logs and delivery receipts. There is no record of any delivery from James Hartwell. He looked directly at Blackwell. Who is James Hartwell? He is a supplier, Blackwell said. His voice was still even. If the delivery records are incomplete, that is a recording error. We have located James Hartwell, Caldwell said. The room went very still. Clara watched Blackwell's face. He lives in Fredericksburg, Caldwell continued. He is 81 years old. He has not conducted business of any kind in 11 years. He has no knowledge of any payments from Whitmore Estate. He has no knowledge of Edward Blackwell. He paused. His name has been used without his knowledge or consent to record payments totaling at our current count more than $4,000 over 7 years. The number landed in the room like something physical. Blackwell sat very still. For the first time, the performance was not quite holding. It was still there. The outward composure, the straight posture, the controlled breathing. But behind his eyes, something was moving very fast, running options calculating. "I would need to see whatever documentation you are referencing," he said. Before I could respond to any such allegation, "There is one more thing," Caldwell said. He looked at Clara. Clara walked forward from her place at the back of the room. She placed the 41-page document on the table in front of Caldwell. Then she placed beside it the copy of the notebook. Then she placed on top of both a single sheet she had held back from everything else, the page from her father's original ledger, the one with the duplicate entry, the one that Nathaniel had held to the lamp the night she'd shown him. These notes, Caldwell said, were compiled by Miss Clara Bennett, daughter of Robert Bennett, who served as the estate's bookkeeper from 1800 to 1811. They document, in chronological order, the pattern of fund misappropriation, the ghost supplier accounts, and the disbursements to individuals outside the estate, including payments to James Holt, the former county magistrate, and Arthur Linwood, the county land assessor. Blackwell's head moved, just slightly, toward Clara. He looked at her. She looked back. In his face, she saw the moment of recognition, the moment he understood who she was, who her father was, what she had been doing in this house for the past week. She saw it arrive, and she did not look away from it. "Robert Bennett's daughter," he said. His voice was very quiet. The pleasantness was gone. What was underneath it was not anger exactly, it was colder than anger, more precise. "Yes," Clara said. "Your father," he said, "made allegations that were reviewed and found to be without merit." "My father," Clara said, "kept his ledger. He kept every record. He kept them for 7 years in a box under my bed, and I carried them 4 miles on a summer morning to bring them into this house." She held his gaze. He trusted that the truth would eventually find a room where someone had to hear it. Blackwell looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Nathaniel. "Nathaniel," he said. His voice had changed again, softer now, more personal, reaching for the register of an old relationship. "I have served this estate for 15 years. I served your father. I managed this property through your absences, through difficult seasons, through loss." He paused. "Whatever irregularities may appear in old records, I think you know that I have given my life to this house." "You gave Thomas's life to it as well," Nathaniel said. The silence that followed was absolute. Blackwell's face went through something that Clara had not seen it go through before. Not calculation, not performance. Something that looked for just a fraction of a second, like a man standing in front of a mirror he has avoided for a very long time and not being able to look away. Then it closed. "That is an extraordinary allegation," he said. His voice was steady again, precise. "And I will not sit here and—" "The payment is in your ledger," Clara said. "Your handwriting. Physician's fee, February 1813. Charlottesville physician, Dr. Amos Grant. The amount matches exactly what was recorded in the estate's medical accounts." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Dr. Grant was never contacted. He has no record of this estate. He has no record of Thomas Whitmore. You recorded a payment for a doctor you never sent to a dying man." She stopped. "That is in your handwriting in a ledger you kept in the east wing of this house, behind 3 books on the second shelf from the bottom." The room was absolutely still. Blackwell looked at her, and for the first time in 7 days, she could see all the way through the warmth and the ease and the practiced performance to the thing underneath, cold, precise, and suddenly clearly cornered. He stood. "I will not continue this proceeding," he said, "without my own legal representation." "You are free to seek representation," Caldwell said. "This proceeding is suspended until such time as you do so. Mr. Morrow, please note the time and Mr. Blackwell's statement." He looked at Blackwell over his spectacles. "However, I should inform you that as of this morning, I have filed a formal notice with the Circuit Court in Richmond documenting this review and its findings to date. The court has been asked to appoint an independent examiner to review the estate's complete records. He paused. And a notice has been filed with the State Attorney General's office regarding the payments to Mr. Holt and Mr. Linwood. Blackwell had gone very still. The magistrate's office, Caldwell continued, has been notified that Daniel Holt may be a subject of that inquiry, and has been asked to recuse himself from any proceedings related to Whitmore Estate pending the examination. He folded his hands on the table. I filed all of this yesterday from Richmond, before I rode here. Clara watched Blackwell understand what that meant. The magistrate was neutralized. The Attorney General had been notified. The circuit court had a formal record. Every wall he had built, every arrangement he had made, every name he had purchased, they had gone around all of it before they had even walked into this room. You did this, Blackwell said. He was looking at Clara. My father did this, she said. I just carried it to the right room. He looked at her for a long, hard moment. Then he looked around the room at Samuel Greer, who was watching him with steady, unblinking eyes, at the Harmon daughter, who had not moved, at Ellis Cooper's son, with his left hand folded in his lap. And something shifted in Edward Blackwell's face that Clara would think about for years afterward. Not remorse. She would not call it remorse. But something adjacent to it, the specific terrible clarity of a man who has convinced himself for 15 years that what he built was order, and who is standing in a room full of the people his order destroyed, and who cannot for once in his life manage his way out of seeing it. He sat back down. His attorney, when he found one, would fight it. There would be a process, months of it, perhaps longer. There would be challenges and delays, and the grinding machinery of legal proceedings that never moved as fast as justice demanded. But the room was on the record. The witnesses were on the record. The 41 pages were filed in Richmond, and Edward Blackwell, for the first time in 15 years, had no wall left to stand behind. Nathaniel looked at Caldwell, who nodded. Then Nathaniel looked at Clara across the room, across the assembled witnesses, and the carefully recorded evidence, and the weight of 7 years across everything that had led from a summer morning 4 miles down a red mud road to this moment, this room, this silence. He looked at her the way a man looks when he has been handed back something he did not know he had lost until it was gone. Not gratitude, something older than gratitude. Clara looked back. Outside, the summer heat pressed down on Virginia, on the 600 acres of Whitmore land, on 47 tenant families, on a grave in a churchyard, where a man named Robert Bennett had been buried in the spring of 1808 with a truth nobody had been ready to hear. They were ready now. The proceedings against Edward Blackwell did not end in a single dramatic moment. That was the thing nobody told you about justice, that it did not arrive like lightning. It arrived like a river, slow and relentless, wearing down what it could not break all at once. In the 3 days following the hearing, Blackwell retained an attorney from Richmond, a sharp, expensive man named Forsyth, who arrived at the estate on Monday morning with the practiced confidence of someone who had extracted wealthy clients from difficult situations before. He met with Caldwell for 2 hours in the main office, while Clara sat in the filing room and listened to the quality of the silence, and tried to read what it meant. Nathaniel came to find her at noon. Forsyth is arguing that the ledgers cannot be admitted, he said, sitting across from her at the filing room table. He says the manner in which they were located. Anticipated, Clara said. Caldwell says the same. The circuit court examiner arrives Friday. He will conduct an independent review of all estate records, which includes Blackwell's rooms as part of the estate premises. He paused. Forsyth is trying to have that scope narrowed. Is he succeeding? Not yet, Nathaniel said. She looked at him. He had not slept well. She could see it in the set of his face, the particular tension around his eyes that came from lying awake doing arithmetic. She recognized it because she had the same thing. It's going to take months, she said. It was not a question. Caldwell says possibly longer, Nathaniel said. The Holt situation complicates things. A magistrate implicated in the same web, the state will want its own inquiry separate from ours, and the two processes will have to be coordinated, and the courts do not move quickly when political names are involved. I know, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, You could leave. She looked at him. Not that is not what I mean, he said, the careful man's composure slipping just slightly in the way she had come to recognize as him, meaning something he was not sure how to say. What I mean is that the formal part of this, the legal process that can proceed without your daily presence. You have given Caldwell everything he needs. The document, the notes, the testimony. You are not required to remain. I know, she said again. But you are staying, he said. I am staying, she said. He was quiet for another moment. Why? She looked at him steadily. Because my father spent 11 years in this house trying to make it right, she said. I have been here 9 days. I think I can manage a few months. Something moved in his face. The thing he had been holding since Thursday, since she had told him after Saturday, say it after Saturday, moved closer to the surface. Clara, he said. Nathaniel, she said. I would like you to stay, he said. Not for the proceedings, not for the legal process. He stopped. Started again. I am not good at this. I want you to know that I am aware that I am not good at this. You are better at it than you think, she said. I asked 30 women the question, he said, and I knew when I asked the first one that none of them would give me the answer I was looking for. Because the answer I was looking for wasn't about the question. It was about whether any of them would see past the question to what was actually being asked. He looked at her. You were the only one who did. What were you actually asking? She said. Whether there was anyone left, he said, who believed that the right thing and the true thing were worth more than the safe thing. The filing room was very quiet. Outside somewhere on the estate, a horse shifted in its stall, and the summer heat pressed down on everything, and Clara Bennett sat across from Nathaniel Whitmore, in a room full of his family's records, and thought about her father, who had believed exactly that, and who had paid for it, and who had been right anyway. There is one thing I need to tell you, she said. He waited. I came to this house with the ledger, she said. That is true. But I also came because I had read about the question you asked, and I wanted... She stopped. I had spent 7 years being careful, being quiet, surviving. And I was so tired of it. I was so tired of being the daughter of a man who told the truth and was destroyed for it, and doing nothing but keeping his records in a box under my bed. She met his eyes. I came here because I wanted to do something. I wanted it to matter. I needed it to matter. It mattered, he said. I know, she said. But I want you to know that I did not come here only for justice. I came here because I was desperate and angry, and I had nowhere else left to take it. She paused. I want you to know who I actually am before you say whatever you are about to say. He looked at her for a long moment. Clara, he said, a woman who carries her father's truth for 7 years and walks 4 miles in summer heat to put it in the right hands, that is not desperation. That is the most deliberate act of courage I have ever witnessed. He stopped. And the anger. He almost smiled. The anger seems entirely appropriate, given the circumstances. She looked at him. Also, he said, I have spent 9 days watching you outthink a man who outthought everyone else in this county for 15 years while running on very little sleep and a great deal of stubbornness. I am reasonably confident I know who you are. Something loosened in Clara's chest. The particular tightness of a person who has been braced for a long time and is only now in a specific safe moment allowing themselves to stop. You said after Saturday, he said quietly. I did, she said. It is Monday, he said. It is, she agreed. He reached across the table, not impulsively, not dramatically, with the same careful deliberateness that characterized everything he did, and placed his hand over hers where it rested on the table. She did not pull away. They stayed like that for a moment in the filing room of Whitmore Estate, with 7 years of her father's truth finally in the right hands, and the long work of making it count still ahead of them, and the summer heat outside, and everything still uncertain, except the weight of his hand on hers, and the fact that she was not going anywhere. After Saturday, she said softly, was a very long time coming. "Yes," he said. "It was." Time. The circuit court examiner arrived on Friday as Caldwell had said he would, a methodical man named Prescott, who spent 3 days in the estate's records and emerged from Blackwell's rooms on the second day with the leather case and 4 ledgers, and an expression of someone who has found exactly what he expected to find and is not pleased about it, Forsyth argued. Forsyth was very good at arguing. But the ledgers were in Blackwell's handwriting and the examiner was independent, and Caldwell had filed everything in the right order at the right time. And there was a point in legal proceedings when a very expensive attorney cannot change what the documents say. That point arrived on a Tuesday in late August. Blackwell was formally removed as estate manager pending the completion of the inquiry. He was not permitted to leave the county. His accounts were frozen by order of the circuit court. The state inquiry into Daniel Holt and Arthur Linwood opened 2 weeks later, and the names in the ledger began their long, slow progression through the machinery of official consequence. It was not fast. It was not clean. On 3 separate occasions, Forsyth found procedural grounds to delay proceedings, and each delay cost Nathaniel weeks, and Caldwell work, and Clara a particular kind of grinding patience that she had not known she possessed until she had to use it. But it moved. It always moved. Samuel Greer gave his formal testimony in September, his wife beside him in the courtroom, and when he finished speaking, the room was quiet, in the same way the main hall had been quiet on that Saturday morning, the quiet of a truth that has found the air and cannot be put back. The Harmon daughter gave hers the following week. She brought every letter. She read the relevant portions aloud in a voice so precise and controlled that the court recorder had to ask her twice to slow down, because he could not keep pace. Ellis Cooper's son held up his left hand during his testimony and said simply, "This didn't have to happen," and then said nothing else because nothing else was needed. The twist came in October, and Clara had not seen it coming. She was in the study with Nathaniel and Caldwell when Caldwell set down a document and said, "There is something we need to discuss." The way he said it made both of them go still. "The state inquiry into Arthur Linwood," Caldwell said, "has produced a record that was not in our original documentation." He paused. "It concerns the 3 families who were removed from the eastern edge of the property 2 years ago. The ones Blackwell told Nathaniel had expired tenancy agreements." "What about them?" Nathaniel said. "The removal was not legal," Caldwell said. "Linwood's assessment was fabricated. The tenancy agreements had not expired, they had been altered. The originals which Linwood had retained as part of his own records." He paused again. "Apparently, Linwood kept records of his own in the same way Blackwell did. The state inquiry found them." Clara looked at Nathaniel. His face had gone through something very still and very tight. "The families," he said. "Where are they?" "2 of them have been located," Caldwell said. "They moved to Fredericksburg after the removal. They have been surviving, not well, but surviving." He looked at Nathaniel. "The 3rd family." He stopped. "The father died last winter. His wife and children are with her sister's family in Alexandria." Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. Clara watched him absorb it. The specific weight of harm that extends beyond what you have already counted, that keeps arriving in new shapes when you believed you had mapped the edges of it. She watched him sit with the fact that the 3 families he had been told left legally had been driven out, and that 1 man had not survived the winter, and that this too was part of the architecture of what Blackwell had built. "I want them back," Nathaniel said. His voice was very quiet. "The 2 families in Fredericksburg. I want them offered their land back, full restoration of their tenancy compensation for the 2 years they have been away." He stopped. "And the widow in Alexandria. I want her and her children provided for, whatever they need." "That is your right as the estate's owner," Caldwell said. "It is not a legal obligation," Nathaniel said. "It is the other kind." Clara looked at him. She thought about the question he had asked 30 women. About a hungry farmer and a manager who demanded punishment. About what it meant to ask why your house had food while your neighbor had none. He had not just been testing those women. He had been asking himself. He had been trying to figure out in the only way he knew how whether he was capable of being the kind of man the estate needed him to be. She thought he was beginning to find out that he was. "Nathaniel," she said. He looked at her. "Your father built a good thing here," she said. "It was taken apart from the inside. You are putting it back together." She paused. "Your brother would recognize what you're doing." His jaw tightened, then released. The grief was still there. It would always be there, but it was the kind of grief that had been looked at directly and named, and was now part of the architecture of a man, rather than the thing crushing him from the inside. Thomas would have argued about the method, he said. Would he have argued about the purpose? Nathaniel thought for a moment. No, he said. He would not have. Then he would have helped, Clara said, and he would have been right to. The formal conclusion of the inquiry came in December, 6 months after Clara had walked into Whitmore Estate with a canvas bag and her father's ledger, and the particular desperation of a woman who had run out of patience with waiting for the world to be fair. Blackwell was found liable for misappropriation of estate funds across 11 years, fraudulent record-keeping. And in the finding that cost Forsyth the most sleep, Clara thought conspiracy in the obstruction of tenant relief that had directly contributed to documented harm, including medical harm, to persons under the estate's responsibility. Daniel Holt resigned his position as magistrate before the state inquiry could formally recommend his removal. Arthur Linwood was stripped of his appointment. The 3 fabricated supplier accounts were traced and closed. The money, not all of it, because some of it had moved too far through too many hands to be fully recovered. And justice is never as complete as the people who fought for it deserve, but enough of it was recovered to fund 5 years of the relief fund at full operation. On the day the final documents were signed, Caldwell shook Nathaniel's hand and then turned to Clara and said, "Your father would have been a remarkable attorney, Miss Bennett." Clara looked at him. "He was a remarkable bookkeeper," she said. That was enough. Caldwell smiled a full smile, the first she had seen from him in 6 months of precise, careful work. "Yes," he said. "It was." He rode back to Richmond the following morning. That evening, Nathaniel came to find Clara in the main hall. She was standing near the window, the same window she had stood near on the morning she walked into this room for the first time when 30 women had just filed out, and the summer heat was white against the glass, and she had looked at Nathaniel Whitmore across a room full of arranged chairs and told him that the question he was asking was not the question he thought it was. He came to stand beside her. For a moment, they were both quiet, looking out at the December evening at the estate grounds gone gray and still in the early dark at the 600 acres that had been the subject of so much calculation and harm, and now, very slowly, something else. "I want to show you something," Nathaniel said. She followed him. He took her to the east corridor, past the linen closet, past the small sitting room that nobody used, and stopped in front of Blackwell's former rooms. The rooms were empty now, cleaned and cleared, all trace of the leather case, and the 4 ledgers and 15 years of careful, terrible documentation removed. He opened the door and went in and stood in the center of the room. "I am going to convert this," he said, "into an office for the estate's relief fund. A permanent office with a dedicated administrator, someone who reports to me directly, and whose records are open to any tenant on this property at any time." He turned to look at her. "I want it to be the room where people come when they need help. I want it to be the place where the answer is never, 'The fund is empty,' when the fund is not empty." Clara stood in the doorway of the room where Blackwell had hidden his ledgers and looked at the man who was choosing to put something honest in its place. "That is a good thing," she said. "It is a starting point," he said. "There is more. The 3 families, the Greers, the Coopers, the Harmons. I have spoken to each of them about what they need. Not what I think they need, what they have told me they need. There are repairs. There are debts that should not be theirs to carry. There are—" He stopped. "There is a great deal of work." "I know," she said. "I would like your help with it," he said. "Not because you are the best person I know to organize accounts and cross-reference records, though you are." He paused. Because you are the person who taught me that asking the question is not the same as listening to the answer. Clara looked at him. What do you want, Clara? He said. Not what will help the estate. Not what your father would have wanted. What do you want? It was such a simple question. It was the question nobody had asked her in 7 years of survival, 7 years of being the daughter of a dead man's truth, 7 years of carrying something forward because she could not put it down. She thought about it genuinely. I want this to matter past us, she said finally. Not just the legal outcome, not just Blackwell's removal. I want when those tenant families tell their children what happened here, I want them to be able to say that the house changed. Not just that the bad man was removed, that the house itself became something different. She looked at him. I want the question to stay alive, the one you asked, not as a test, as a practice. He held her gaze. Then stay, he said. Help me make that true. I intend to, she said. He crossed the room and stood in front of her, close enough that she could read every line of his face, the grief, and the determination, and the thing that had been building since a summer morning in this house, when she had told him she was still deciding what she believed about him. And the other thing, he said quietly. The thing that is not about the estate. That too, she said. He took her hand. Not the careful, tentative gesture from the filing room table. This time, deliberate, certain, the gesture of a man who has finished being afraid of what he means. I have been alone in this house for a long time, he said. I know, she said. I do not intend to be alone in it anymore, he said. Good, she said, because I am not going anywhere. They were married in the spring in the small church 3 miles from the estate on a morning when the Virginia air had finally released the winter and everything smelled like new ground. Samuel Greer and his wife sat in the front row. The Harmon daughter sat beside them. Ellis Cooper's son sat in the 3rd row and held his left hand in his lap and watched with the expression of a man who has seen something he was not sure he was going to get to see. Caldwell came from Richmond. Delia, the cook, who had brought Clara a glass of water on the morning of the question that changed everything, cried quietly into a handkerchief and denied it when anyone looked at her. The ceremony was short and plain because both of them were people who did not need ceremony to mean the things they meant. They said what was true and necessary, and they meant every word of it. And when it was done, Nathaniel looked at Clara with the expression she had been learning to read for 7 months, the one that was not just warmth, but something under warmth, something that had been there since the first morning and had simply been waiting for a room where it was safe to be visible. That afternoon he took her back to the main hall. The 30 chairs that had been arranged on the morning of the question were long gone. The room returned to its ordinary use. But she knew where they had been. She could still feel the shape of that morning. The 30 women in silk, the summer heat against the glass, the particular silence after she had answered. Nathaniel stood in the center of the room and looked at her. 30 women, he said. They told me what a perfect wife should be. I remember, she said. You showed me what a good person should be, he said. I need you to know that I understand the difference, and I need you to know that I am still learning it. He paused. I expect to spend the rest of my life learning it. Clara looked at him, at this man who had asked a question out of grief and need, and the desperate hope that someone in the world still believed the right thing was worth choosing, and who had found in the answer not just the person he was looking for, but the version of himself he had not known how to reach. Then keep the question alive, she said. Every time this house faces a choice between what is easy and what is right, keep asking it. I will, he said. And Nathaniel, she said. Yes. The next time you ask it, she said, listen to the tenants first. He almost laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind she had been working toward for 7 months, the kind that reached all the way up through the careful composure and the careful grief and the long practice of keeping everything controlled and came out clean and genuine and entirely his. I will do that, he said. She took his hand. Outside on the 600 acres of Whitmore land, the spring was doing what spring does, covering everything that had been hard and cold and dark with something new, not erasing the winter, but making it matter less than what was growing. In the East Wing, the new office of the Estates Relief Fund held its first open record day. Samuel Greer came to check the accounts, as he had volunteered to do monthly, and he sat at the desk and read through the ledger with the focused attention of a man who has learned at great cost that records must be kept and must be checked and must be kept again. 3 families who had been away for 2 years were back on their land. A widow in Alexandria had received a letter and a bank draft and the formal acknowledgement of what had been taken from her husband, which was not enough, and could never be enough, and was something. The truth. Robert Bennett had carried for 11 years and hidden in a box under his daughter's bed, and trusted to survive him. That truth was in the open now, in the courts and the records, and the formal language of legal proceeding permanent, in the way that documented things are permanent available, in the way that Clara had promised the Harmon daughter it would be available, in a room where people had to sit and hear it. Clara Bennett had walked into Whitmore Estate with nothing but her father's ledger, and the truth he had not lived to speak, and she had stood in a room full of power and silence and asked the question underneath the question, and she had stayed until the answer changed something real. She had not done it to become anything. She had not done it to be saved or rewarded or transformed into a version of herself that other people would find acceptable. She had done it because her father believed the truth was worth the cost of speaking it, and because she was his daughter, and because some things are simply worth doing, even when you cannot yet see the room where they will finally be heard. She had found the room, and the room at last had answered back.